to you, good people of Africa and of the people in the world at large. Thank you for joining us once again. It's the second edition of your informative and knowledge sharing program, Global Insight, proposed to you by GLOBUS and the Pan-African Media Television. Today we want to discuss the effects of disinformation in shaping global world order. In our interconnected world, disinformation is and continue to play a critical role in shaping perceptions in politics, economics, culture, religion, among other aspects, impacting the global order. This episode of Global Insight, however, examines disinformation, its elements and its influence on globalization, international relations, and public perception of key issues and its ramification in shaping world order. Though this information started in the 50s, according to report, it has taken another dimension in this digital era. A recent prime example is Donald Trump's US president use of an unfounded video claiming a white African genocide in South Africa, which to an extent highlighted the use of rhetorics by global leaders in their political discourse to turn falsehoods into perceived truths. Historical instances of disinformation, such as those during the Holocaust, the Rwandan Genocide, and the Arab Spring, among others, illustrate still the dangerous consequences of such narratives. So in today's landscape, with heightened information warfare, where citizens are increasingly aware of information dissemination complexities, disinformation threatens national sovereignty and, however, and also ideologies, especially amid renewed imperial interest across the globe. This calls for a greater awareness of how this information undermines the established of a US-centric world order. Disinformation also campaigns, probably disinformation campaigns have been successful in recent times. Disinformation campaigns work well due to cracks or lapses in our society. How then can government, civil society, other stakeholders actually prove reality from this information? And just to note that the rise of bodies like the BRICS nations and of course the championing of multipolarity actually brings in a new dogma that will indicate a shift towards a more responsible global society, that it's prompting us to investigate these ideologies that contributes to the prevalence of disinformation today. So with a panel of experts, we're going to have an in-depth analysis, understanding what disinformation is, trying of course to differentiate it from misinformation and other ideologies or terminologies which we find very prevalent in today's complex society, where international shifts in international relations have shown how major powers are trying probably to redefine their scopes, and of course what real definition can we give to this concept of disinformation, and how can we mitigate the negative effects of it on society and of course the global world order. Thank you so much. I'll go straight away to getting to unveil our panel, and I think we're going to go to Russia. Let's meet with YULIA BERG. She's a political scientist, also founder of GLOBUS Expert Club, and we are welcoming you to this edition of Global Insight. Of course, starting with the first question, answering what this information is all about and some of the contextual framework of the terminology and how it affects our world of today.
Hello. Well, first of all, I'm happy to join this program today and happy to see the amazing panel of experts. So I'm sure it will be a very interesting and fruitful discussion, especially given the fact that the topic of today, disinformation, is very much up to date. We're living now not even in the era of post-truth, as it used to be called, but we live in the world of, let's say, shades of gray, when On the one hand, we have millions of pieces of content being produced every day. And at the same time, the core of that content and let's say the essence of it is not always clear in terms of the sources, in terms of the key points mentioned there, and so on. So on the one hand, we have the high tech and all the technology that allows for immediate production of content, both in the shape of text and in the shape of visual materials. And at the same time, we see how this kind of content is sometimes consciously, sometimes unconsciously being used in order to promote certain narratives or certain ideas, to plant them into the audience's brain, basically. And this is becoming very tricky, not to say dangerous, because the deepfake content, on the one hand, the content that is not even false, but is just something being said, is already impacting a lot the stock markets, the exchange rates, the situation, let's say the financial rates, and the behavior of the people, because sometimes this kind of content is targeted at triggering emotions, triggering certain behavior patterns, certain decisions being made. So for instance, we see some aggression coming in, or content basically promoting the idea of aggression. So that is aimed at creating fear, that is aimed at creating defensive behavior patterns and aggressive behavior patterns in return. So we could observe this kind of methodology being applied to peoples and nations globally in order to control them, in order to control their minds, their behavior, their consumer behavior, their political behavior, social behavior, and so on. And if you want to talk about recent examples of how deep this can go, not to mention simple aggression being fueled between, I don't know, Ukraine and Russia, between India and Pakistan, and Israel and all of its neighbors. But if you want to have a deeper example, that probably would be the entire transgender policy that in just a couple of decades has affected people that much that they went into having their children undergo surgeries that are irreversible. So this is how deep this type of propaganda can affect our decision-making process and our ability to make short and long-term decisions. That's why it's essential to discuss this topic today, I believe, because in the ocean of information that is not, nothing like black and white, but all of it is shades of gray. It is essential to be able to navigate through it and to have a strong moral compass and a strong set of, let's say, beliefs, and to have a certain kind of a vector that would be showing the path, because otherwise it's easy to drown, or it's easy to lose the direction. The importance of this topic cannot be underrated.
Indeed, and it is a call for us all in the world to remain vigilant and critically engage as the narratives we consume can greatly influence everything around us. Thank you so much, Yulia, for that analysis. And of course, let's make our next stop to the United States of America by welcoming Mr. Ashil Eke, who is an international financial expert, and we want to appreciate you. Like we mentioned, this information doesn't only spread around lines of politics or culture, but we also have this information around the sphere of economics. So with you giving us a clear definition of what this information is, we want to hear from you, Mr. Aki, what some of the factors that have made this information more prevalent in our society of today, especially as international cooperation or relations is concerned.
Thank you very much, Clarisse, for the invitation. I think it's been a long time since we haven't had a conversation like this, on your show. I'm glad that we are back together, especially on this channel, Pan African Media. Listen, the question on the economic front about this topic is critical because disinformation today is recognized as a top global risk, with profound and multifaceted impacts, on the world economy. For example, the World Economic Forum, the 2025 version, focused on global risk and ranks misinformation and disinformation as the #1 risk right now, over the next 2 years, ahead of stuff, things like weather, extreme weather, geopolitical conflict, and so on. So now, when we talk about disinformation, let's look at the different aspects, how it affects different aspects of the global economy. If we look at the market volatility, recently, there's been a lot of losses, and those losses have been triggered by disinformation, which create irrational market, activities, movements, and also we have false fake news, false news, whether it's information, whether it's false news coming from companies or bad companies, or bad the economic indicators that people put forth, misleading investors, or even on geopolitical events, that we've been watching recently, the war in Ukraine and things like that. Those type of events can abruptly, create a situation on the market that could, result in a sell-off or rally, based on whether the information is positive for the market or negative for the market. So that caused a lot of volatility, right? So when we talk about also on the reputation front for companies, for corporations in general, companies targeted by disinformation spend on average about $10 billion each year on reputation management. That is significant. Because what the company has is its brand. When that brand is tarnished and by misinformation or disinformation, we have to understand that disinformation is information that's put out there for the purpose of doing bad, to the person that it's being targeted to. Whereas misinformation is an information that's put out there without any intent to harm the person or the party, but the effect is the same. It's all negative. So, exactly. So, when it comes to corporations, disinformation could have a very expensive effect on them. When we look at the foreign direct investments, in general, we also notice that fake news, usually that we call fake news, they can influence investor sentiment, right? So, from what research have shown, it's fundamental that in this world, in this economic and digital world today, that institutions and corporations, institutions, and the like, remain strong, because when that doesn't happen, disinformation could really undermine confidence and complicate investments decision when it comes to foreign direct investments. So another aspect is the market credibility also. There is an erosion of the market credibility because people don't trust the market anymore. People are not sure exactly if the market is behaving in an appropriate way or is being led by information that is trustworthy or not. And that is very damaging for investors because they have a sensation, they have a feeling that the market is being manipulated, and we've seen there recently Trump being part of that disinformation too. He recently, when he said, to people, that when the market is down, so be ready to invest, be ready to buy, something like that. I'm not quoting exactly what he said, but he went on his social truth media and then posted that you know, market is down, it's good time to buy. And then the next day, you know, he waived the tariff situation that he put out there on the world, and the market went up to 1,000 points.
Okay.
1,000 points. So that's also part of disinformation. That is really not appropriate from the, you know, for president to be doing that, to manipulate the market like that. So there are different areas like that on the economy that we can touch, and then we can see that disinformation has a really impact, especially financially for companies, for institutions, for the market, and that could really undermine the trust that people put on the market today.
I don't know if we should be asking the question if probably this information should be made a norm in society today, given all the dynamics, or probably as far as you know, the world of politics, economic, culture, even religion is concerned. And still in the same perspective, you just mentioned the United States, and that's why we are going to stay with you, Steve Gill. And this time around, you know, you're a political commentator, and we're looking at this recent meeting between your president, the president of the United States of America, Donald Trump, with his South African counterpart, Cyril Ramaphosa, that actually brought again us to probably think of how political discourses and other narratives are being tailored intentionally to probably change public perception about a particular country, nation, which actually affects its diplomacy. And now, aside being a political commentator, you're also a media personality. We want to look at the effects of such a move on the trust that the global world has when it comes to news that comes from the United States of America. And how do you think the media can navigate this very controversial moment of information warfare? Hi Steve, you are muted, please. Hello Steve, is everything okay now? I think we're going to continue with Paseka Farumele to get his own perception, given that South Africa was at the fore. And while we were talking in the preamble, we quite mentioned a whole some sort of examples citing the Holocaust, and of course we also cited the Rwandan Genocide, and this information was at the center of what happened in Rwanda and the Arab Spring. So in giving a topic for this, the Paseka Faramali, in what ways do you think you know, political, economic and social factors can create an environment that is conducive to probably fight this disinformation, which has existed since the 50s and is gaining grounds today in this very complex world of today?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Clarisse. I think one of the biggest problems that we have is that disinformation has real life impact. So it does not necessarily just stop with it being something that is seen to just move around maybe the economy, maybe move around the markets and etc. But it has real life impact. It does impact people's lives. And I do love the fact that you touched on something that was important, the Rwandan genocide. One of the primary things that was used before the genocide started was that the media was used a lot. So there were radio stations which are used to push narratives, to vilify people, to dehumanize people, so that you could be able to lay the grounds for you to be able to kill these people in mass. So it is very important for us to be able to combat these these disinformation sessions that we've continuously have found ourselves having to engage with, especially recently. Myself as a South African who lives in South Africa, seeing what is being portrayed of South Africa to the rest of the world, specifically by the President of the United States, I found it very necessary for us to step out and to speak to these things and to speak to them with facts, you know, because if we use the case of Rwanda, we see what was the eventual impact. And I don't want to use the words, but that was on a smaller scale. That was not even on a global scale where you are having problems between nations. Because the reason why it's difficult to say it was on a smaller scale, because people lost their lives en masse. So the same thing that happened with the United States first coup in Guatemala, where what they did was they used a lot of disinformation where they were trying to target the population, the general population, that is, about the instability that was happening in the country. And it is very difficult for you to be able to listen to the radio. You are presented with certain narratives, certain stories are being driven, you are told that soldiers are attacking a specific spot. You start asking yourself, am I safe? You become uncomfortable with your environment, even though all of that is not happening. One of the key things that the United States used specifically in that context was the media, specifically the radio, where they were funding and using lots of money to fund these disinformation campaigns, which at the time were not called specifically that. But what they did was that they manipulated the minds of the people for them to believe, even though their eyes are telling them not to believe. So it is very important for us to be very careful when we're dealing with these matters and to be very vocal and speak to disinformation and misinformation itself, because as my panel has spoken, that disinformation and misinformation are not the same thing. Absolutely. Misinformation for me is specifically a person like Trump, because for me, I see Trump as someone who pushes misinformation because he believes it, even though I do not believe that he knows that he is lying when he is pushing that information. That's why he is able to say these things so passionately and so openly, because he genuinely believes that there is not an alternative reality which is based objectively off of fact. So that is why he does that. But disinformation for me is looking at someone like Elon Musk, who proudly steps out there and he knows that he is misinforming the population. And he knows that he has a platform, specifically Twitter, X, where he's able to push these ideas of his for his own self benefit, because he knows if he can push these narratives, he's able to manipulate what happens in different parts of the world. And because Twitter is such a big platform, all right, let me just finish that sentence. Sure. Because it is such a big platform, what happens is that you are able to manipulate so many people in such a small space of time with such little information. So for me, I'm saying that look at the two, disinformation and misinformation. Misinformation, see Trump; disinformation, see Elon Musk. I think that makes it simple. Thank you, Clarice.
Thank you so much. We're going back to Steve, if everything is okay. Steve, welcome. Let's now answer. Do you think what happened recently with your President Donald Trump, was it misinformation or disinformation at this juncture, given what Paseka just highlighted now? You're still muted, Steve.
We're not hearing you, Steve.
Steve, please, can you check your mic? You're still muted. I think we will leave you again and come back probably about in a few minutes while we continue to analyze the topic for discussion. We're coming back to Yulia. I quite remember in during the 2024 presidential elections in Russia, which actually I was present alongside other journalists and even observers. Before the proclamation of the election results, we saw news already from the Washington Post and other supposed mainstream media writing instances of probably disinformation, as I can put it, because they cited that people who voted in the new regions were voted or probably voted under some sort of duress or probably gunshot, given that the state they mentioned was the state where I and my colleagues were present. Now, it shows that it is a very difficult one for the media to navigate in the process of news giving. How can we now, in this digital era, Yulia, help the media to probably understand these complexities in the information warfare, and what parameters do you think this sphere can use to be able not to mislead the world in the process of news giving?
Even in more simple cases, you would always have a great space for interpretations, and you would always have quite a vast variety of versions emanating from an event that, let's say, a few people attended. So if you ask 5 different people that attended the very same event, you will hear very different impressions. So when it comes to the definition itself of the truth and of false, what you can clearly be talking about is facts. Otherwise, it's all about interpretations. Yet at the same time, this is exactly what one of the key objectives of spreading information is, especially in cases when you need to manipulate through the audience.